I stumbled upon a haunted Viking village where the cold nights awaken dark spirits. I never should have opened that door. It creaked like a warning, flaking paint and all. Inside, the air was thick, pure dread clung to me. My heart raced. It was just another Tuesday, or so I thought. I was exploring, searching for something lost in time. But instead, I found shadows that flickered just out of sight. The village lay in ruins. A chilling gust forced the colors from the landscape. Dark stones, old and crumbling, seemed to whisper secrets. A thin veil of mist crawled along the ground, like spirits weaving through the remnants of past lives. The darkness felt alive, wrapping around me, smothering warmth. I could almost hear the whispers of the ancient souls, grasping for recognition. Then came the noises, a scraping sound. Something fragile skittered across a cold stone. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. I waited, listening, but the sounds faded. I stepped cautiously, the chill creeping under my skin, my pulse in my ears. The village felt like a grave, silent but unspeakably heavy, holding its breath. Suddenly, a shadow darted behind a patch of twisted trees. I blinked, straining to see, only darkness stared back. A cold shiver ran down my spine, the air shifted. Curiosity gnawed at my senses, but terror gripped my chest tighter. I fumbled for my phone, needing light, something to cut through the dark. The flashlight beam flickered, wavering like my resolve. Then there it was again, that scraping noise, then a sudden crash. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned sharply, and there the outline of a figure loomed at the edge of the mist. My breath caught. It didn't move, just stood there, an imposing silhouette against the shadows. "Who's there?" I croaked, but silence swallowed my voice. Just the cold wind whistled around me, taunting that I needed to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. The figure took a step closer, and the dim light caught a glimmer of something sharp. "No," I whispered, my chest tightening. Before I could think, before I could breathe, the world around me exploded into chaos. The door behind me slammed shut with deafening force, plunging me into darkness. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness enveloped me, a suffocating blanket that numbed my senses. I spun around, disoriented. Each anxious breath felt sharper, and that cold presence, once a whisper, now roared, thrumming through the hollowed village that had once been alive with the laughter of warriors. I raised my phone, trembling fingers desperately pressing the flashlight button, revealing a fractured landscape of gnarled trees and collapsed huts. It was a grotesque tableau, but my eyes were pulled back to where the figure had stood. Gone out, a sudden burst of wind howled through the narrow crevices of the village, causing me to stumble back. The air around me seemed to tighten, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I felt a cool finger graze my shoulder. My skin prickled, fear gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I darted my flashlight across the ground, praying to catch a glimpse of whatever stalked me. The beam revealed shards of bone half buried in the dirt, the remnants of forgotten lives. I swallowed hard, bow rising in my throat, feeling watched, hunted. And then came the whispers. It was a cacophony of voices, muffled yet somehow distinct, calling out to me from unseen corners. "Help us!" a low, mournful plead echoed, resonating in the hollow expanse. I shook my head violently, willing them to silence. I wanted to turn away, to escape this cursed place, but something deeper clawed at my conscience, an icy curiosity mixed with dread. Who were they? What had they suffered? I took a hesitant step forward, heart racing, each breath a desperate attempt to steady myself. I stumbled upon a ragged banner, bare and torn, flapping mournfully against the howling wind. The markings were unfamiliar but stirred emotions of long-forgotten glory and anguish. I touched it, fingers trembling, feeling the rough fabric as if reaching across time. That's it, I whispered to myself, you have to leave. But something held me, an invisible thread binding my fate to the ancient spirits that lingered here. As I turned to retrace my steps to safety, the oppressive darkness thickened, swirling around me like a living entity. It tugged at my clothes, pulled at my hair, a frantic dance of malevolence. The whispers escalated, an angry chorus, a warning that pressed on my consciousness. I bolted towards the last flicker of light from my phone, but it sputtered, dimming to a breath. Panic surged, igniting the fear buried deep. My silhouette flickered against the stone walls, and I caught sight of the looming figure again, just at the edge of that cursed light. Its eyes, two dark pools of nothingness, bore into me. The sharp glint of a blade was more apparent now, reflecting the waning light. "Leave it," rasped, voice cold and smooth like glass. "You'll be devoured by the sons of night if you linger. What you seek lies deeper, and you won't return." The ground quaked beneath me, and the village itself seemed to shift, groaning under a weight of sorrow and anger. My feet moved on instinct, the instinct to flee, but the shadows stretched and curled around me, clinging, slashing at my heels as I dashed away. I stumbled out into the village square, breathless and wild-eyed, when a sudden chill wrapped tightly around my throat. My heart plummeted as I felt it again, that icy touch not on my shoulder this time, but something much worse, fingers curling around my neck, squeezing, tightening. I gasped for air but found myself surrounded by chilling laughter that echoed all around. Mocking my desperation, I wrenched my gaze to the source, a ghostly figure materializing from the mist, wretched and shifting, blood dripping from its hollow eyes, mouth gaping wider than any human could manage. "Stay with us," it hissed, the malicious delight clear in its tone. Before I could react, they came. More shadows surged forward, eyes gleaming hungrily in the fading light, every inch of me screaming to escape. But as I turned to flee, the ancient ice beneath my feet cracked and splintered, the jagged fissures glowing with a dreadful light, revealing a chasm of darkness that seemed to breathe. I could not stop. I was falling, plummeting into endless black, shrieks of the forsaken echoing all around. "Help us!" and then silence. It swallowed me whole. When the silence shattered, I found myself tumbling into an abyss, weightless and engulfed by an all-consuming darkness. It clung to me like a shroud, pressing down, blinding my senses. I could feel myself slipping into the void, and panic surged through me like a frigid current. Suddenly, I landed hard on damp earth, the breath knocked from my lungs. I gasped, realizing I was still alive, but the air around me was thick and fetid, saturated with the smell of rot and despair. As I rolled to my feet, the faintest glimmer of light flickered ahead, a twisted promise of safety or doom. Instinct drove me forward. The terrain beneath me felt wrong, squishy, as if I were running on the carcasses of those trapped before me. My footsteps were muted, swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. The disembodied whispers intensified, echoing down the passageways of my mind. Help us, they coiled around my thoughts, pulling me deeper into their agonizing plea. I stumbled into a cavernous space lit by a ghostly luminescence that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the earth. Shadows danced against the walls, merging and parting in forms too grotesque to discern. The air shimmered with something tangible, like the flickers of a candle flame struggling against the suffocating dark. Within the glow, I saw the remnants of those who had been here before, warriors dressed in tattered remnants of armor, their eyes vacant but pleading, their mouths forever frozen in cries of anguish. My heart raced. Who were they? What had they done to deserve this torment? I stepped closer, instinctively drawn to the spectral figures. One of the warriors, a man with a long, matted beard and sunken cheeks, reached out a skeletal finger. "Beware, traveler. They consume the light, they feast on the brave," he rasped, his voice reverberating, echoing against the cold stone. "How do I escape?" I cried, desperation spilling from my lips. But his eyes, once filled with fierce loyalty, were now mere voids of despair. "Leave this place or join us," he warned. "The darkness does not care for your will. It only seeks to drag you beneath its surface, to swallow your very essence." Before I could respond, An otherworldly shriek split the air, drowning my thoughts. The light flickered violently, and the forum before me morphed into chaos, figures contorting and writhing as shadows gathered like starving wolves around their prey. In that moment, I understood that the village had not just been cursed, it thrived on the fear and despair of those trapped within its grasp. It was alive, feeding on the spectral suffering of its inhabitants, a dark heart pulsing with malevolent life. The whispers became frantic, the cacophony of voices blending together until they coalesced into a single scream, that of 1,000 tormented souls. With renewed panic, I turned to run, but the shadows thickened, twisting and curling, baring long, jagged teeth. They lunged for me, and I bolted into the depths of the cavern, heart pounding, lungs desperate for air. My breath came in gasps, each inhale laced with the rancid stench of decay. Frantically, I searched for an exit, every step sending me deeper into a surreal landscape of wailing echoes and incessant horror. Just as I started to lose hope, I stumbled upon an opening, a fracture carved in the stone like a mouth through which the cries of the lost spilled forth. The glow pulsed behind me, enticing but ominous. As I approached the crack, jagged rocks jutted out, threatening to trap me in their grasp. I squeezed through, my body scraping against the rough edges, feeling them bite into my skin as the whispers transformed into mocking laughter behind me, taunting my every move. Suddenly, I broke through into open air. I gasped, breathing in the crispness of the night, but it felt wrong, tainted with something I couldn't name. The stars blinked overhead, yet the moon hung low and malevolent, watching, waiting. As I turned from the chasm, relief began to flood through me, but then I froze, terror clawing up my spine. The village stood before me, the structures now intact, as if no devastation had taken place. The air crackled with energy, electrifying the atmosphere. A figure emerged from the mist, silhouetted against the moon. It wasn't the menacing specter I had seen before. This one shimmered with a cold beauty, adorned in armor that caught the light eerily, reflecting the stars like shards of glass. "You shouldn't have left," it whispered, a chilling serpent of clarity trickling into my mind. I knew then that the dark presence was not only bound to the village, but it had followed me, wrapped its tendrils around my very being. As the figure raised its hand, the ground beneath began to tremble, and a rupture snaked outward, gaping and hungry like a mouth ready to swallow. Helpless, I realized I had made a choice, but it was the wrong one, and the price was about to become painfully clear. The earth split open, revealing a pulsating void, a repetition of death and despair, calling to the deepest fears of my soul. The shadows beckoned, whispering my name. "Help us!" And suddenly, I was falling again, into a nightmare-repeated descent into darkness where there would be no return. As I descended into the abyss cast by the gaping maw of the earth, my screams echoed into the void. I braced myself for impact, knowing too well that falling in such places often led to more than just broken bones. Instead, I emerged into a labyrinthine nightmare, one that shifted and turned with every pulse of the darkness around me. The walls of this subterranean realm were slick and bloodied, reflecting a glimmer of moonlit hues that felt both alluring and repulsive. I stumbled forward, disoriented, for the weight of time and history pressed heavily upon my shoulders. Faces of tortured souls glimmered in the dank walls, their eyes wide and mouths opened in silent screams, frozen in a moment of despair they would never escape. Around me, shadowy figures flickered in and out of existence, their forms morphing into grotesque imitations of life. A woman adorned in braids of ice, her skin as pale as death, glided by, and her soft sobs wrapped around my heart like a vice. I reached out to comfort her, but she melted into vapor, whisking away into the stagnant air, leaving a hollow chill in her wake. The darkness responded to my desperation, the space closing in around me as the whispers began to crescendo. They clung to my mind, each syllable stretching out as if clawed from the very depths of suffering. "You cannot escape. You are one of us now." The voices twisted my resolve. I had evaded the first hell, but now this place was intent on drawing me deeper, unraveling everything I thought I was. I pressed on, each footfall reverberating against the cold stone floor like a funeral dirge, until I stumbled upon a chamber larger than the rest. It was lit by an eerie luminescence emanating from strange totems carved into the walls, ancient runes that pulsed with malevolent energy. In the center, a crude altar heaved with tokens of sacrifice, rusted blades, broken shields, and the remnants of what once were human remains, their bones fragile and dust-like. Thick chains, glimmering with a malicious sheen, hung from the ceiling like sinister vines, swaying slightly as if anticipating the return of their prey. In the very center of it all lay a monstrous figure shrouded in darkness, its form barely defined yet emanating an aura of dread so potent it made my stomach churn. I realized too late that the runes began to pulse with an even more sinister rhythm, a binding incantation of sorts woven by some ancient tongue no longer spoken. "Foolish wanderer," a voice boomed, echoing through the chamber with enough force to rattle my bones. "You have entered the sanctum of the damned. Here, you will pay for your trespasses." I looked up, scanning the towering figure before me, its eyes ignited with a fire that mirrored the deepest pits of hell. It leaned forward, a mouth of jagged teeth twisting into a grotesque smile. "Their pain was delicious," it hissed, "and now, it is your turn." The ground trembled violently, and the chains rattled, releasing a cacophony of anguished wails. In that horrid moment, shadows erupted from the walls, swirling around me, pressing in like a vice. They were the spirits of the forgotten, fed upon by this entity. Their forms danced and flitted, bathed in a chaotic frenzy that hinted at both madness and despair. The agony in their cries matched the beating of my heart, quickening with each pulse of dark energy. I was hungry for escape, but any notion of freedom faded as the very walls seemed to bend, warping reality like a reflection in a shattered mirror. I could feel the sinister presence clawing at my essence, seeking the darkness buried deep within my soul. "No! I am not one of you!" I screamed, but the words fell flat against the gale of despair that enveloped me. The chains unfurled from their spots, lurching forth and wrapping around my limbs with the ferocity of predatory beasts. They pulled me closer to the altar, and I frantically clawed against the stone surface, terror weaving through my chest. Just as I thought I would be consumed, a blinding light burst forth from the altar, briefly illuminating the darkness. The chains recoiled as if scorched, but the flickering glow was fleeting, cut short by the ever-present shadows that battened upon it like vultures. I twisted and thrashed against my bonds, feeling the shadows grow dense and heavy like concrete weighing down my spirit. But then, in the height of my struggle, a voice broke through the chaotic tapestry of horror. Remember us, the names came to me, whispered like long-forgotten keys unlocking the dark intent of the cursed village. The figures from the cavern, those warriors of anguish who had warned Mezim, they were calling out, reaching across the chasm of time and despair. I realized that the true battle was not merely against the shadows that sought to claim me, but against the very force that bound the village in torment. I needed to remember, needed to harness that knowledge, but such a feat demanded a price. The pulsating energy surged again, resonating through the altar, and the figure loomed ever closer, hunger reflecting in every grotesque line of its body. I gritted my teeth, ready to face the chaos, but just as I steadied myself for the confrontation, everything went dark. The roar of the abyss swallowed my thoughts, plunging me into a silence more profound than the depths I'd escaped. And in that horrifying blackness, I saw the flicker of eyes, all of them watching, all of them waiting. With one gut-wrenching lurch, I was thrust back up, erupting into the soft winds of the night. I found myself standing before the village once more, unchanged but pulsing with an unsettling energy. The inhabitants moved like phantoms, not acknowledging my presence, as if my return was a commonplace affair. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in a window, a faint shadow that bore a striking resemblance to the demonic figure I had encountered. And then I felt it, that weight, the pressing dread of something dark and terrible shifting within. Nothing was resolved, it had only just begun. And the whispers resumed their haunting calls, rising above the stillness of the village, as I stood frozen, knowing the night had just unveiled a new horror I'd never anticipated, one that awaited within me. The village, once a mere backdrop to my terror, now pulsated with a life of its own. My heart raced as the whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like a gossamer of darkness. Each sound carried echoes of lament mixed with jagged laughter, a symphony of despair that beckoned from the shadows cast upon crooked houses. The village was not just haunted, it was alive, seething with the memories of ancient horrors that had long since settled into the marrow of its land. As I stumbled down the frosted pathway, moonlight spilled onto the cobblestones, revealing awkward carvings that resembled runes but twisted grotesquely, mocking the familiar language of a forgotten past. Memories of battles fought and lives lost seeped through the cracks like festering wounds. The air was thick with the pungent scent of decay, curling around me like a lover's whisper, urging me to delve deeper into the village's heart. I caught snippets of conversations, phantoms of the past lamenting their fates. The blood must flow to awaken the wrath. A voice growled, punctuated by gnarled sobs that rattled like old bones. I pressed forward, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't decipher, a need to unearth the roots of my dread. The shadows elongated, stretching across the ground, and I could feel something sinister pulling at my consciousness, whispering promises of power, of understanding. I was almost entranced, teetering on the edge of madness, when a sudden chill ripped through the night, snapping me back to reality. The villagers had ceased their ghostly murmurs and now stood in a perfect row, their faces obscured by dark hoods. They turned in unison, their eyes glinting like obsidian knives. "Join us," they intoned, their voices harmonizing into a hypnotic melody. "Join the shadow of the village, the legacy of the fallen." Terror clawed at my throat, and I stumbled backward, but my feet sunk into the ground as if I were trapped in a thick mire. The shadows began to dance around me, warping reality into a grotesque display of swirling forms and elongated limbs. "How did you return?" A figure stepped forth, its face hidden beneath a veil of shadows. "You escaped the abyss, but you cannot escape us. You already wear our mark." Panic seized me, and I raised my hands to my face. The reflection in the window flickered back at me, chaotic and beautiful, merging with the village's essence. I turned, frantically looking for a way out, but the village had transformed. The buildings leaned inward, their structures twisting into monstrous forms, closing off any chance of escape. I glanced over my shoulder to find the villagers were now advancing, their movements slow yet deliberate as they stretched their fingers toward the heart of the darkness that resided within me. "Accept your fate," the leader urged, lifting its face so the shadows fell away, revealing a visage that was both ancient and disturbingly familiar, my own face, twisted and marred by agony. "The shadows feed on fear. It connects us all. You have returned to reclaim what was lost, but know that to grasp wisdom in this realm, a blood price must be paid." Desperation surged like liquid fire in my veins, thrumming against the surface of my existence. The villagers continued their advance, their expressions a blend of hunger and sorrow. It was as if they yearned for something I could not understand, a part of me intertwined with their anguish. "No! This is not who I am!" I shouted, gripping my skull as the reverberations of their cries clawed at my sanity. But the shadows wrapped around me, burrowing deep within, unearthing buried desires and untamed fears. I fell to my knees, unable to fight against the tide of looming darkness. In that moment of surrender, a blinding pain burst in my chest, a void where hope once resided. I gasped, feeling my heartbeat slow, each thump dragging me deeper into the murky abyss of despair. The villagers surrounded me, their chants rising to a fever pitch. "Become one of us, embrace the shadow, and reclaim the cycle." A searing flash of illumination erupted from my chest, momentarily scattering the shadows away. Guttural screams filled the air as the villagers recoiled, a moment of chaos erupting among them. But just as quickly as it came, the light faded, and in the darkness, I felt the entity within me stir, awakening something primal and ancient. "Your choice is made," the leader whispered, grinning as my vision began to blur, drowning in cold waves of darkness once more. "We are stronger together. The reckoning has just begun." My senses dulled, dissolving with each heartbeat, until all that remained was infinite shadow and a cacophony of voices. But amidst the void, a new cry emerged, sharp and piercing, igniting my soul with urgency. It echoed through the fabric of despair, "Fight! You can't let them win!" I felt a jolt surge through me, a flicker of rebellion igniting amid the numbness, and yet the villagers encroached, their grip tightening. Just as I feared succumbing to the darkness, a horrifying truth settled in the depths of my mind. In this cursed village where shadows reign, I might just be the weapon needed to end the nightmare, become the ultimate horror myself. In my last attempt to grasp onto my humanity, the shadows whispered from everywhere, taunting my resolve, "You'll never escape. You'll become one of us forever." The walls shook with a chorus of laughter as my vision darkened, leaving me teetering on the brink, unsure if I would emerge as savior or monster. And then, I stood at a precipice, caught between two worlds as the skies erupted in a storm of lightning that illuminated the cursed village. But beyond the veil of darkness, something stirred. A figure cloaked in silk and flames erupted from the shadows, and my heart plummeted as recognition washed over me. It was the woman from the cavern, her voice echoing above the din as she reached out her hand. "Will you stand against them, or succumb to the night? Decide now." And just as I extended my hand toward her, darkness surged forward, swallowing all hope in a single moment of dread. The storm raged above, crackling with an intensity that mimicked the tension within me. The dark figure cloaked in flames held my gaze, her ethereal features flickering like a candle struggling against the wind. Each flash of lightning revealed fragments of her visage, a mixture of beauty and terror entwined, shifting as if she were a mirage on the corner of my consciousness. "Choose!" she urged again, the desperation in her voice pulling me closer, but the shadows writhed like living creatures, hungry for my surrender. The villagers around me surged with a collective breath, a tide of despair ready to drown me. Their malicious eyes bored into me, each gaze a dagger of shame and guilt, reminding me of betrayals long buried and fears unspoken. "Fight them!" the woman cried, her arm outstretched, embers crackling like tiny stars around her in a tempest of flame. "The village cannot be saved without your defiance. You are the key." The weight of her declaration settled on my shoulders like a crushing ocean wave, pulling me deeper into the very depths of despair I had fought against. I felt the cold tendrils of the shadows gripping me tighter, a creeping numbness seeping into my bones. It was a familiar sensation, one I had known all too well, a feeling that whispered sweetly of retreat, of giving in, of releasing the burdens that clawed at my being. Yet her fiery presence sparked something within me, a flicker of memory of a child who once believed in heroes and righteousness. I wanted to scream, to promise her I would fight. However, the very fibers of my existence trembled with doubt. What if I fail? The villagers, relentless, began to chant again, a litany of sorrow woven with the dread of eternal night. "Embrace the ancient. Reclaim thyself within the shadows. You will not fight, for you have already chosen." Their once familiar forms warped grotesquely, elongating as they shifted closer, merging with the darkness surrounding us, embodying the very essence of despair I had tried to escape. A pang of longing flooded my heart, mixed with the bitterness of regret. I remembered the faces of those I loved, now blurred memories alongside the horrors of this cursed village. I felt the stirrings of rage bubbling within me, howling against the inevitability of surrender. "No! I won't let your darkness consume me!" I yelled, feeling an unfamiliar strength surging through me, fueled by the fiery embrace of the woman who stood unwavering against the storm. The wind howled, and for a moment, it seemed even the villagers hesitated, their relentless advance faltering as if my newfound resolve had momentarily shaken their grip on reality. "Together!" I called to the fiery figure, feeling the vibration of my voice reverberating through the sinister air, urging me forward. But my determination came at a cost. The shadows recoiled in waves like serpents scalded by flame, and suddenly, the air was thick with a cacophony of anguish as the villagers shrieked. They twisted and contorted, struggling against the chains of their own darkness. It was agony painted against the canvas of my soul. I could sense their suffering. I remembered their names, their stories interwoven with the tapestry of my own life. "You seek to burn the darkness, but darkness feeds on the light," hissed the leader, his voice a haunting reminder of our shared history. "What you unleash upon them will ignite your fate." I felt it then, the piercing pain of understanding my own life threaded into theirs, a cycle of suffering wrapped within the shadows. With each heartbeat, my past collided against branches of the present and future, intertwining in a dance of horror. I might not only unleash a fiery reckoning but also cast myself into the abyss alongside them, unraveling the connection that chained us. Before I could ponder my next move, the villagers surged forward, their hands clawing through the darkness like spider legs. Just as I prepared to retreat back toward the woman of flame, a sinister laughter erupted, echoing through the night, vibrating in my chest. A massive shadow separated from the throngs of villagers, taking the form of a beast the size and shape of a man, but with limbs like tangled roots, and eyes like two hollow voids. The creature loomed above, an embodiment of every horror, every sorrow the villagers held. It extended a hand towards me, palm up and sinister, as if offering me a choice buried in agony. "Join us, and together we shall transcend," it bellowed, its voice reverberating the shadows that wrapped around, a cocoon of despair. I glanced back at the woman, who was beginning to flicker, her flame growing weaker against the relentless darkness. In that moment, reality twisted as the shadows shrieked with laughter, and the villagers ascended their impending arrival, ready to reclaim what they believed was their due. I felt the pull toward the great beast, an invitation to join the abyss, a pact woven through centuries of torment. In the chaos of choice, I found myself teetering between the flickers of light and the embrace of the shadow, the final stand that would shape our fates. And just as I drew a breath to declare my allegiance, the creature's maw opened, revealing a swirl of swirling smoke and memory, and darkness spilled forth, wrapping around my limbs like chains. I realized, with chilling clarity, perhaps the horror of this village was not inherent. It was the very product of our choices. As I felt myself disintegrating amid their laughter and cries, I locked eyes with the woman one last time, whispering a promise through the din. "I will find a way," but before the words settled, the shadows consumed me, plunging me into an abyss beyond comprehension. And in that crushing darkness, a flicker of recognition ignited, a realization that perhaps the true horror of this village was not in the shadows but within my own heart. As I fell deeper, the sounds of 1,000 cries merged into one, the voice of my own fear, echoing as I plummeted through the void. Would I emerge unscathed, or become yet another lost soul, another villager entwined in the relentless cycle of horror? And then, a shriek shattered the night, sharp and potent, reverberating with unmistakable dread, leaving me hanging at the threshold of existence, the echoes spiraling around me, drowning out reason. "Decide now. Choose your doom." Falling into the darkness was like being embraced by millions of icy fingers, each one peeling away at my sanity. The torrent of voices grew louder, anguished whispers clawing at my mind, reminding me of the life I knew, churning memories of warmth and joy into ash. The shadows, spectral and serpentine, danced around me, weaving a tapestry of despair that threatened to pull me into an eternal night. A moment stretched on into infinity, as I swirled through the void. Then, out of the relentless blackness, a flicker of light appeared, a beacon amidst the consuming shadows. My heart raced. Could this be the return of the woman? Was she reaching for me, or was this simply another trap, a siren's call to lure me deeper into the abyss? The light flickered faster, pulsing like an erratic heartbeat, almost in rhythm with my own. As I drew closer to the light, the air thickened with emotions long buried. I could hear the villagers again, their voices morphing into a low chant that echoed through the darkness. "You cannot escape, child of the light. You will join us." The words slithered into my consciousness, wrapping around my thoughts like rusted chains, anchoring me to the sorrow of their fated existence. Every syllable resonated with loss and longing, tugging at some hidden grief within me. The vision of the Viking village materialized before might's once vibrant colors drained, transforming into shadows of their former selves. I was standing at the edge of the village square, the cobblestones glistening with a sheen that looked unnaturally wet, as though weeping in the night. The air was thick with fog, swirling in unnatural patterns that whispered my name like a lullaby of despair. Suddenly, a voice broke through the cacophony, cutting sharper than the chill that enveloped me. "You should not have stepped into the dark, seeker. The choice will cost you more than you know." It came from a figure cloaked in rags, dirt streaked across their face, eyes clouded but burning with an eerie light. Features twisted into grotesque masks of desperation and rage, the villagers slipped back into view, distorted shadows yet again. "What do you want?" My voice shook as it shattered the stillness around me. What is this place? The ragged figure stepped closer, their breath a cloud of frost. This village is a prison, woven from your fear. Your very essence fuels its being. You were right to feel the threads of your life intertwining. Every hatred, every betrayal has crafted this hell. You can't defeat them because you are one of them. Before I could respond, the air exploded with abject terror. A massive figure, just as before, loomed over me, his twisted roots grasping the damp earth, eyes like swirling voids. You have come to be judged, and we shall see if you truly belong among the shadows. Panic constricted around my throat. I struggled to find my voice, desperate to convince them I was different, but the darkness enveloped me, igniting feelings I had long buried and forgotten. The tears of the villagers fell like rain, resonating with each heartbeat, threatening to pry open the doors of my fears. In that moment, just as I felt the fabric of my being begin to unravel, I noticed a shimmer in the shadowy depths, a small flame flickering weakly, reminiscent of the woman's past brilliance. I lunged toward it, eager to grasp whatever shred of hope lingered in this grim suffocation. Alas, as I approached, the shadows recoiled, forming into unprecedented shapes, amputating the spark with tendrils of despair. The villagers screeched in a horrific chorus as the light ebbed away, a shrill cry of shared torment that twisted my heart into knots. You will return. The cycle must continue. With renewed determination surging through me, I surged toward the beastly voice rising above the echoes of fear. No! I defy this fate. I choose my own path. Just as the words fell, a gust of wind swept through the dark, extinguishing everything within a breath, and then, from the void came a low, mocking laughter, rich with malice, swirling around me like unseen chains. You believe you can rewrite your fate, boy? The darkness remembers. And the darkness always eats its own. The ground beneath me tore apart as if drawn by a dark gravity, pulling me into an unseen chasm, my limbs flailing against the depths. I could see nothing but the screaming faces of the villagers spiraling out of control, their features a haunting mosaic of agony. Just as I was about to disappear into the maw of the abyss, the ground ripped open one last time, spitting me back onto the cobblestones. I gasped, my lungs searing with the freeze of the air, and turned to face the shadows that hovered at the edge of the village. But what I saw next seized my brain. The multitude of eyes, dark and swirling, had gathered not just to watch, for they were surrounding me. Every villager stood as one, faces shifting, features blurring as they merged into a single entity. Their forms pulsated with anger and despair, growing larger and contorting, straining against the threads of reality. Choose. Your time is done. Join us or perish in the light. The merging entity howled, as one of the faces broke free, launching toward me, a visage of someone I recognized from childhood but was twisted with unspeakable sorrow and rage. My heart pounded in a dreadful rhythm, the weight of choices bearing down on my soul, blurring the line between light and darkness. And then, the splitting scream pierced my ears, freezing my breath where I stood. You cannot escape the truth. With a jolt, I realized the truth was that I was never meant to escape at all. The choice had been made for me long before this night, entangled in the web of my own desires. As the entity reached for me, and the shadows threatened to swallow me whole, I braced for the impact of their eternal night, knowing that the horror of this cursed village would unfold in ways I could hardly begin to comprehend. My final thoughts spiraled with dread, as I felt the darkness close in. Everyone must pay their dues. The cacophony of anguished cries and the relentless embrace of the shadows became almost palpable as I faced the swirling mass of despair before me. The writhing faces converged into one, each plea for release blending into a devastating symphony of torment. It was as if the very essence of the village had risen to claim me, stitched together from the remnants of its suffering. The air thickened with an overwhelming dread that clawed at my throat, stifling my screams. In that moment, I felt time fracture. The weight of the villagers' spirits closed in, each whisper brushing against my skin like icy fingertips. Desperation surged through me. This was no longer just a maze of dark specters, it had morphed into a living entity, pulsating with sorrow and rage, as if the village itself had awakened from its slumber, hungry for vengeance. Leave! I shouted, though my voice quivered in the face of such despair. You don't own me. I am not one of you. But the shadows resonated back with laughter, twisted and ancient, intertwining with the multitude of eyes that glimmered like fading stars, casting me further into the abyss. With a sudden burst of clarity, I remembered the woman, the flicker of hope that had birthed within my chest earlier. Could she be a beacon amidst this madness? The thought became my lifeline, yet as I reached for it, the villager's frenzied energy whipped faster, pulling me off balance, threatening to drown me in their sorrow. She is lost, the entity's voice snarled, and the hundreds of glowing eyes glinted with malice. You shall pay for her choice. You have come to mingle with the forgotten. Before I could muster a response, new shadows, darker than the first, began to unfurl from the depths of the village, weaving through the air with a predatory grace. They undulated and shifted, forming grotesque shapes, each one a manifestation of the villager's unfulfilled Ragia. Child's laughter twisted into a shriek, a mother's lullaby mingled with cries of betrayal. A sinister figure emerged, towering above the rest, its limbs crafted from the broken hopes of those it had consumed. The air crackled with an energy that warned of impending annihilation. The entity that had once fused all the villagers into one horrid visage began to unravel, splitting into fragments that joined with others, creating an army of shadows. Join user, witness your essence being torn asunder. They screeched in unison, the sky darkening, drowning the remnants of twilight. I turned to run, to escape the malevolent tide, but each step felt more laborious, as if the very ground beneath my feet had become quicksand, pulling me into despair instead of liberating me. The designs of the villagers began to whisper secrets that seeped into my brain, each syllable a thread unraveling my sanity. Memories of childhood nightmares surged forth, blood memories of betrayal and loss. With every step back, I could hear my own fears echoing, reanimating the sinister past I thought buried. Suddenly, a blinding light burst forth from the depths of the village square. The flames rose like an inferno, illuminating the darkness further back, flickering shadows that danced wildly as if they were trapped souls trying to escape, desperate, pleading, alive. This light was not the comforting beacon I had once hoped for. It was a warning and a lure, an embodiment of the entity's wrath. Embrace the truth. It wailed, voices high and low, echoing throughout the haunted village, engulfing my senses. All who come here live in darkness. You belong to us, you always have. The presence grew heavier, suffocating in intensity, pressing against my chest. Just as flashbacks threatened to drown me in despair, I caught hold of the flame, feeling warmth pour through me like molten gold. A woman. Perhaps she was near. Maybe she, too, was trying to escape. I could almost hear her voice beckoning me, muffled yet sweet. But as I extended my hand towards the light, the shadows leaped forward, intertwining with the flame in a horrific wrestling match of illumination and darkness. The shadows surged, reaching out, seeking to snuff her light. With a deafening roar, the entity lunged, its vast arms stretching impossibly wide, a dark torrent aimed directly at my heart. Choose, Seeker. Choose now. It shrieked, eyes aflame with madness and hunger. I felt the pressure pushing against my soul, squeezing the essence of who I was, squeezing against my lungs. In that instant of primal fear, I realized that the choice before me was not about joining the villagers. No, it was far simpler and far more horrifying. It was about keeping the flicker of hope alive or allowing it to extinguish, all while the shadows threatened to consume everything I ever cared for. With the ground trembling beneath me and agony scorching through my veins, I screamed into the night, I will not give in. I will fight. And the shadows recoiled for a fleeting moment, the cessation of pressure enveloping me as the villagers halted, ethereal faces contorting in disbelief. But then, uncontrollable chaos erupted as they lunged forward once more, swarming like a tidal wave. As the first tendril of darkness grazed my skin, I braced myself for what was to come, but in that chaos, I glimpsed something I hadn't noticed before, a new figure emerging from the depths, cloaked in my memories, her features a ghostly reflection of my own, a harbinger of doom, and yet, perhaps, a last ray of salvation. The realization hit with a deafening crack. The woman was no mirage. She was mere, rather, a twisted version of the self that could perish if I failed to grasp the elusive truth. And just as the shadows reached for me, their gnarled fingers brushing my skin, the scream of a familiar voice echoed through the void, shaking me to my core. You must remember. You must choose wisely. The shadows tightened their grip, and in a piercing moment of clarity, a shocking vision unfolded, a glimpse of my very own past, woven into the darkness, insinuating that my struggle against the shadows was not just for survival, but for the very soul of a shattered village and for the forgotten woman who may hold the key to our salvation. But as I began to understand, just a breath away from liberation, the ground trembled violently, ripping apart beneath me, and the abyss yawned wide. A crushing sense of inevitability filled me as I fell once more into the dark, the gaze of countless eyes etching my fate into the fabric of despair. What's left of you will join us, they whispered, their voices creeping into the corners of my mind even as I plummeted deeper, forsaken, clawing desperately at the shadows that threatened to engulf me. The haunting realization settled in my heart. The pursuit of salvation always demanded a sacrifice greater than one could ever anticipate. And even as I sank into nothingness, dread gripped me tighter than ever. What would happen to the flicker of hope amidst the shadows? In the empty void, the truth echoed back, refracting through the darkness. Everyone must pay their dues, and the time for payment has come. The world spun as I descended into the inky abyss, every flicker of my hope extinguished under the weight of despair. Yet amidst the shrieks and mocking laughter, something within me dared to push against the encroaching dark. As I tumbled deeper into the void, my thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm, but one thought fought its way back to the surface, the haunting echoes of the woman's voice urging me to remember. Remember. The command resonated through the darkness, a lifeline in the chaos that sought to drown me. But remembering required a confrontation with my past, a confrontation I was terrified to face. I shut my eyes against a flood of memories that crashed over me, vivid and raw, displacing the shadows that wrapped around my consciousness like shackles. Suddenly, the shadows twisted, revealing fragments of my childhood, the creaking floorboards of my old home, my mother's sweet lullaby shadowed by the weight of sorrow, the laughter of friends that once filled my days, all wearing grim masks, distorted and warped by anguish. Each scene a reminder of the burdens I had thought were left behind. With a heart pounding against the confines of my chest, I grasped at the shimmering threads of recall. I tried to weave them, but they slipped through my fingers like grains of sand. I needed to connect the dots, to find the woman who had pleaded for my retrieval, to embrace the truth that scuttled just out of reach. The shadows rolled at my sides, whispering, taunting. "Let us guide you," they slithered, their voices a cacophony of lost souls. "Remember where you belong." But there was no belonging here, only a fearsome desire to escape the torment. With every pulse of the dark, my fear ignited, transforming into a potential fire for revolt. I tore my gaze from the swirling darkness around me, forcing myself to focus the memories that clawed at me where they were supposed to illuminate, to guide. How did we end up here? I thought frantically, piecing together fragmented memories. As visions danced in front of my mind's eye, familiar faces intersected with grotesque horrors, the villagers I had only glimpsed through the veil of shadows, reflections of their anguish merging with my own life, revealing the burgeoning truth. I had not only come to this forsaken village, I had come to confront my own demons. With newfound clarity, I could almost hear her again, the woman I'd seen, twisted like the shadows. She was a specter born from the brokenness I'd tried to leave behind. Faced with the truth, I realized that her release lay in my acceptance of the reality I had shunned. "Remember," the voice implored once more, echoing through the encroaching dark. With a sudden determination, I reached deep within the abyss of myself, a swirl of emotions, grief, guilt, and a glimmer of suppressed rage bound together in a desperate bid for salvation. And then I saw it, a flickering light at the heart of the darkness, a brilliant glow amidst the consuming shadows. It pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat, growing more insistent with every painful moment. I lunged towards it, my fingers brushing the cool surface of what felt like an ethereal membrane that veiled truth from my sight. A rush of energy surged through me, darkness recoiled, screeching in agony as the light illuminated the truth of my past, unraveling the veil of lies. Suddenly, I was pulled into a kaleidoscope of memories. I was a child again, standing before my father, watching him crumble as the shadows invaded our home. A rift had been torn in that memento bridge connecting my life to this wretched village. I had denied the truth, the day I left my family behind, the day my father succumbed to despair triggered by the specters manifesting from my own fears. As the realization set in, a gut-wrenching pain coiled around my heart. I was eternally tied to the suffering of the villagers. The chains that bound my very existence remained alive. The shadows were remnants of my careless decisions, spirits corrupted by grief, by betrayal that stemmed from my actions. In a frenzy driven by fury and sorrow, I screamed, I remember. I am your kin. The shadows paused, the cacophony quieting to a near silence as they throbbed and hushed in response. For a moment, I thought I could sense the villagers' eyes upon me, mournful but not entirely hostile, curious about my newfound resolve to confront our shared despair. But my declaration seemed to awaken something else, an ancient presence lingering just beyond the reach of the pulsating light. The darkness quivered, and then a horrific laugh rolled through the void, sending shivers rippling down my spine. Blood returns to blood, it whispered, a low, rumbling voice underscoring the shift in atmosphere. Sacrifice is not bound by memory. Bow before your legacy or suffer the consequences. At that moment, a vortex of shadows erupted around me, teeth glimmering like daggers, reaching for my flesh, pulling at my very essence, ready to devour. The light dimmed, flickering under the festering cloud of despair. Terrified fragments of my past flashed before me. A price would be demanded, and before I could comprehend the weight of such a request, the shadows surged with newfound intensity. Your kin will suffer unless you appease us. I fought against it, resisting the pull of despair. No! I screamed as the memories fought back, swirling into madness. I will not sacrifice myself for your vengeance. But the shadows rose up like a tidal wave, crashing upon me with a visceral force that tore through every barrier I had erected. In an instant, I perceived the truth. They craved my despair, feeding upon it, gaining strength with every flicker of anxiety that surged in me. And then, amidst the chaos, my heart lurched as I sensed a figure emerging at the edge of the darkness, cloaked in shadows, yet distinctly familiar. A face that echoed mine. Remember, she urged, the desperation in her voice clear as the shadows threatened to swallow her too. In that instant, a horrifying realization burst forth. She wasn't fully here. She was a tether to a future that could vanish should I fail to remember correctly. As the shadows beckoned, coiling tighter around me. You cannot escape your fate. They shrieked as my resolve wavered, the ground trembling beneath us. And it all centered on her, the embodiment of my past, the echo of my choices, flickering at the precipice of oblivion. One choice would sever the ties forever. But how much was I willing to sacrifice for her salvation? Just as I grasped for the last strands of hope, the ground began to quake violently, splintering reality around us. With a heart-splitting cry, I felt the tether between our fates fraying. This was the moment where past decisions met terrifying uncertainty, and as shadows came crashing down like thunder, I gasped at our climactic juncture where sacrifices could not be undone. And just as we teetered on the edge of annihilation, I felt the shadows release her with an insatiable hunger, turning towards me, leaving me with an impossible choice, and time was running out. Who will pay the price? Echoed through the widening chasm, the shadows whispering their malevolent intent. I was no longer certain where the darkness ended and I began. But I understood one thing: the haunting price for salvation would inevitably claim its due. And as the abyss transformed into an icy maw, I was left poised on the brink between light and unfathomable darkness, and one choice would forever alter the course of my soul. I crawled through the suffocating fog of despair, the echoes of tortured souls wrapping around me like tattered rags. Each breath invaded my lungs with anguished whispers, the village now alive with the cries of the forgotten. My fingers grasped at the earth beneath me, clawing for anything tangible but finding only remnants of sorrow, shards of glass and fragments of time, pieces that bled into the darkness I now teetered upon. The weight of their lingering despair threatened to pull me under. Who will pay the price? The question vibrated through the void, and I felt its icy fingers grasp my heart. The specter of everything I had lost, the woman I had come to identify with, hung before me, hovering in anticipation. You must choose, her voice coiled around me like smoke, beckoning with a hypnotic allure. Shadows writhed beneath her, devouring bits of her light as they craved my despair. I need to save you, I gasped, my heart pounding in rebellion against the pending fate that loomed ever closer. I can't let you vanish into the dark. The horde of shadows encircled me, their faces blending together into grotesque parodies, a mockery of lost humanity. I could feel their cold breath against my skin, seeping through my resolve with merciless whispers, each telling me I was bound to the darkness. In this moment, the very essence of the village chanted for retribution, the specters merging and intertwining. You are one with us, they crooned seductively, your past will seal your fate. I could almost feel my father's presence, his stony despair entwined with mine, penetrating through the cobwebs of memory. My throat clenched as realization dawned. This wasn't just about the village, or the woman, this was about my own reckoning. The power of the choice weighed heavier than I had ever imagined. I tried to resist. This isn't who I am. I refused to bear this burden. But as I screamed into the void, the shadows surged forward, so close I could see their grotesque teeth gleaming with a hunger only despair could feed. The village approached from all corners, breathing as one, an insatiable creature that only sought to consume, reveling in the twisted cycle of fear it thrived on. Take her, I finally begged in the frantic chaos, a desperate plea that tasted like ashes, if that's what it takes to save us all. But the shadows surged, recoiling in their frenzy. No, she is yours to save. They shrieked, you are the sacrifice that shall quell the darkness. With their words wrapping around me in a suffocating embrace, I felt a grim understanding sinking deep into my core. The village was built on blood, built on sacrifices made eons ago, ready to devour yet another soul that dared encroach its haunted realm. Time spun away from me, every moment merging into the chaos, the unending struggle unraveling into insanity. Suddenly, the shadows lunged, wrapping around me. I screamed as they gripped my limbs like barbed wire, dragging me toward the ravenous maw. In that instant, I could feel the flicker of hope slipping like sand between my fingers. I will never be one of you, I shouted. Yet even as my voice echoed into the dungeons of despair, their laughter filled my ears, eroding what little resolve remained, and then, as if in response to the culmination of my fear, a blinding light erupted, casting shadows back with a primal roar. The woman stood there once more, the flame alight within her. Perhaps she was the embodiment of the light I had almost extinguished. You can do this. You must remember, she urged, stepping forward. Stray tendrils of darkness writhed and shrieked around her, recoiling at her brightness. I was torn between despair and hope, between surrender and defiance. My heart raced as I readied myself for a confrontation, digging deep into my soul, searching for the truth that had lingered in the shadows. The power of my choices rushed through me, igniting that fragile flicker of lit flame in my chest. It was both terrifying and liberating. The price, I yelled into the gaping abyss, my voice steady and fierce, is the darkness that's hidden my past. I felt the shadows pause, the laughter quieting to a low murmur. A flicker of attention, a crack in their ferocity, as if they were suddenly unsure. Remember, echoed through the air, remember who you are. With newfound strength, I embraced my truth, the pain, the grief, the moments that led me here. The shadows writhed uneasily, sensing my resolve, the struggle within me igniting the fire to reclaim every ounce of my light. I tore through layers of despair, reclaiming pieces of my humanity, refusing to submit to the specter of what I feared I had become. I choose my fate, I shouted, powered by the brokenness that had forged me amid the darkness. And it is not within you. The shadows screamed, anguished and enraged, their grasp loosening as the brilliance of the light expanded, spiraling outward, illuminating the mourning villagers scattered around me. In that blinding moment, I saw them, their faces softened in recognition, murmurs of shared pain coming to life in the embers of my defiance. They were fractured pieces of a once whole village, and my heart swelled with the weight of connection stitched through our shared suffering. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in anger as if the very essence of their darkness was being dismantled piece by piece. The ground shuddered, fissures forming like veins of light, a pulse that signaled rebirth. "Join me!" I cried to the villagers, calling upon every spirit tethered to the remnants of the past. "Step into the light!" One by one, they were drawn to the blaze within me. The light surged insatiably, tearing the darkness from our veins, illuminating even the deepest shadows, weaving a tapestry of healing. But as the last shadows unraveled, the true horror unveiled itself among the swirling remnants of darkness. I recognized familiar faces and fragments of my childhood rooted deep within the abyss. Everyone must pay their dues. I faltered for the briefest second, realizing it wasn't merely their past I reclaimed. In their liberation, I felt their burdens merge with mine, creating something new and terrifying, a dark choice that threatened our legacy. Then the darkness erupted in fury, a furious scream that pierced through the night. I felt the furious eyes of darkness bore into my soul. But deep down, I understood this was merely another chapter, the passing of the curse, but not the end of the terror. As the dust settled, shadows lingered at the edge of my vision, lurking like memories that refused to evaporate. I stood amid the echoes of released spirits, half-formed shapes flickering, waiting for their time to reclaim. The darkness had not truly gone, merely retreated into layers of time. I had escaped the shadows today, but I knew, with a chilling certainty, they would return. And then, gently, from the edge of my consciousness, a familiar whisper slithered through the night as if in response to my haunting fear, creeping into my heart: "You will never truly escape. We are bound, and you walk with the shadows." As I turned to leave, one final thought echoed loudly, a horrific truth that rattled my core. No matter how far I traveled, no matter how much I fought, it was never just the boundless darkness out there. It was the darkness within. And with that, the unsettling realization took root. I am the night that waits beneath the gaze of the stars. The second I stepped foot beyond the threshold, a creeping dread settled in. The village remained a stone's throw behind me, but I could almost hear the depths of the shadows crying, everyone must pay their dues, and that very price would one day echo back, whispering my name.